Jungkook suddenly changes his style for someone special, but Jimin discovers the hidden reason only when the distance between them becomes impossible to cross. Jungkook changed the way he dressed for someone. Jimin only realized it was too late. Take it off. Jimin's voice cracked through the dressing room just as Jungkook reached for the silver chain around his neck. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The mirror between them reflected two familiar faces that suddenly looked like strangers. Jungkook's fingers remained frozen against the chain. Jimin stood behind him, breathing hard, his coat still damp from the rain outside. Water clung to the ends of his hair and slid slowly along his cheek, but he didn't seem to notice. Take it off, Jimin repeated, quieter this time. Jungkook looked at him through the mirror. No. That single word hurt more than Jimin expected. He stepped closer. You never wear things like that. I do now. Since when? Jungkook finally turned around. Since it stopped being about what you think looks good on me. The room fell silent. Outside, people hurried through the corridor, voices rising and fading behind the closed door. Someone laughed. A hanger struck a metal rack. Music from the main hall trembled faintly through the walls. But inside the dressing room, everything seemed to stop. Jimin stared at Jungkook. Black tailored trousers, a cream shirt with the first two buttons undone, a long charcoal coat, silver rings, polished boots. It wasn't extravagant. That was what made it dangerous. Jungkook looked different because every detail had been chosen deliberately. For years, Jimin had been the person who noticed those details. He knew Jungkook hated tight collars. He knew he always loosened his watch when he became nervous. He knew Jungkook preferred oversized jackets because he liked hiding his hands inside the sleeves. He knew Jungkook would rather wear the same comfortable hoodie 3 days in a row than spend 20 minutes deciding what to wear. And now Jungkook stood in front of him looking like someone who had learned exactly how to become unforgettable. Jimin swallowed. Who is it? Jungkook's expression changed. Barely. A tiny movement around his eyes. But Jimin knew him too well. Or at least, he thought he did. Who are you dressing like this for? Jungkook looked away. That isn't your business. The answer landed like a slap. Jimin laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Right. He stepped backward. Of course. Jimin. No, it's fine. It isn't what you think. You haven't even told me what I think. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. That was another habit Jimin knew. Whenever Jungkook wanted to say something dangerous, he closed his eyes first. What do you think? Jungkook asked. Jimin looked at him. I think someone made you want to become someone you're not. Jungkook opened his eyes. And what if I wanted to? Jimin couldn't answer. Because for the first time, he realized something terrifying. Maybe Jungkook hadn't changed because someone else had asked him to. Maybe Jungkook had changed because he wanted someone else to look at him. And Jimin had spent months looking everywhere except at him. The realization arrived too late. It had been happening slowly, almost invisibly. Jungkook had started wearing darker colors, then cleaner silhouettes, then expensive watches he never used to care about. He began fixing his hair before leaving the apartment. He started wearing perfume. Not the citrus scent Jimin used to tease him about. Something warmer now. Woody. Quiet. A scent that lingered long after Jungkook had walked away. Jimin had noticed. Of course he had noticed. He simply hadn't understood. Or perhaps he had understood and refused to admit it. Because admitting it meant admitting that Jungkook might have been waiting for him. And Jimin had been afraid. Afraid of what would happen if the friendship they had protected for years turned into something neither of them knew how to control. So whenever Jungkook looked at him for too long, Jimin looked away. Whenever Jungkook almost confessed something, Jimin interrupted. Whenever Jungkook asked, What would you do if I told you I liked someone? Jimin always laughed. He had thought laughter could protect them. He had been wrong. The door opened. A stylist poked her head inside. Jungkook, they're ready for you. Jungkook nodded. Then he looked at Jimin. For one fragile second, something passed between them. Hope. Fear. Regret. Then Jungkook walked past him. Jimin remained alone in the dressing room. His eyes fell on the discarded clothes lying across the chair. A black sweater. A pair of worn sneakers. The old Jungkook. The Jungkook Jimin knew. The Jungkook he had assumed would always be there. Jimin slowly sat down. His hand trembled as he picked up the silver chain Jungkook had removed earlier. There was something attached to it. A tiny metal pendant. Jimin turned it over. His breath stopped. There was a date engraved on the back. A date Jimin knew immediately. Their first meeting. The day they had promised each other that no matter where life took them, neither would walk away. Jimin stared at the pendant until his vision blurred. Why? He whispered. No one answered. He closed his fingers around it. And suddenly, memories began returning with cruel clarity. The evening Jungkook had asked him to dinner, and Jimin had canceled. The morning Jungkook had waited outside his apartment with coffee, while Jimin rushed past him because he was late. The night Jungkook had said, "Sometimes I wonder if you would notice if I disappeared." And Jimin had replied jokingly, "Don't be dramatic." Jimin pressed the pendant against his palm. He remembered everything. Every unanswered message. Every unfinished conversation. Every look he had pretended not to see. Every time Jungkook had stood close enough for Jimin to feel his warmth and then quietly stepped away. The door opened again. Jungkook stood there. "I'm going on stage." Jimin looked up. "Who is she?" Jungkook froze. Jimin immediately regretted the question. But it was too late. Jungkook's expression became unreadable. "You really want to know?" "Yes." "Why?" Jimin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Jungkook waited. When the silence became unbearable, he smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." He turned away. "Jungkook." He stopped. Jimin stood. "I found this." He held out the pendant. Jungkook stared at it. For a moment, all his defenses disappeared. "You kept it." Jimin's voice was barely audible. "You gave it to me." "No." Jungkook shook his head. "I gave it to you because I thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" Jungkook looked at him. "That I wasn't dressing for someone else." Jimin's heart stopped. Jungkook stepped closer. "I was trying to become someone you could finally see." The words shattered something inside Jimin. He wanted to speak. He wanted to say that he saw him, that he had always seen him. But the words stayed, trapped behind years of fear. Jungkook waited another second. Then he whispered, "But you only noticed after I stopped waiting." He left. Jimin stood motionless. The corridor swallowed Jungkook's footsteps. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. Jimin looked down at the pendant again. His fingers closed around it. He finally understood what all those changes meant. The clothes. The perfume. The careful hair. The rings. The confidence. The distance. They weren't about becoming someone else. They were about becoming impossible to ignore. And Jimin had ignored him anyway. For years. That night, Jimin stayed until everyone had gone. Rain continued falling against the windows, turning the city outside into a blur of silver lights. He sat alone, beneath the dressing room mirror. On the table was Jungkook's old black sweater. Jimin lifted it to his face. The familiar scent was almost gone. That hurt more than anything. Because Jimin, suddenly realized that memories had a smell. And sometimes, when you waited too long to tell someone what they meant to you, even that smell eventually disappeared. The next morning, Jungkook didn't come home. His room was empty. His closet was half cleared. His favorite worn sneakers were gone. So was the little wooden box where he kept photographs, receipts, old movie tickets, and tiny pieces of a life Jimin had never bothered to ask about. On the desk, however, there was one envelope. Jimin stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a photograph. The two of them were sitting on the floor of their old apartment, laughing at something neither could remember anymore. On the back, Jungkook had written only one sentence. I changed because I finally realized waiting for you was changing me into someone I didn't recognize. Jimin sat down. His eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the truth without running from it. He loved Jungkook. Not as a friend. Not as a habit. Not as the person who had always been beside him. He loved him as the person whose absence made the entire world feel incorrectly arranged. And he had realized it only after Jungkook had stopped waiting. Weeks passed. Jimin searched without knowing what he expected to find. Jungkook had left no easy trail. No dramatic goodbye. No angry message. Only silence. That silence became its own kind of punishment. Then, one cold evening, Jimin received a message. One sentence. You once asked why I changed the way I dressed. Jimin's hands began shaking. Another message appeared. If you really want the answer, meet me where we first promised never to leave each other. Jimin knew the place immediately. Their old rooftop. The place where they had spent an entire summer watching the city lights and making ridiculous promises about the future. He ran. The elevator was too slow, so he took the stairs. His lungs burned. The rooftop door slammed open. Cold wind rushed against his face. And there Jungkook stood. He was wearing the same charcoal coat, the same silver chain, the same quiet expression. But something about him had changed again. This time, he looked peaceful. Jimin stopped several feet away. Neither spoke. The city stretched behind them, thousands of windows glowing beneath the night sky. Finally, Jimin whispered, I understand now. Jungkook looked at him. What? Why you changed? Jungkook waited. Jimin walked closer. You weren't trying to impress someone. No. You were trying to make me notice you. Jungkook looked down. For a while. And then, I realized I shouldn't have to. Jimin's chest tightened. I was scared. I know. I thought if I said what I felt, I'd lose you. Jungkook gave a sad smile. And by saying nothing, you lost me anyway. Jimin lowered his head. Yes. The wind moved between them. Jungkook turned toward the city. I don't hate you. I know. I never stopped caring. I know. But I can't go back to who I was. Jimin nodded. I don't want you to. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin took another step. I don't want the old Jungkook. Silence. I want you. Jungkook's eyes widened. Jimin's voice trembled, but he didn't look away this time. The person you became, the person you were afraid to show me, the person who stopped waiting for me. Jungkook swallowed. And what happens now? Jimin smiled through tears. Now I stop being afraid. Jungkook stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached for the silver pendant around his neck. He held it between his fingers. You still have the other half. Jimin's heart skipped. He reached beneath his shirt and pulled out a matching pendant. Jungkook stared. You kept it. I told you. Jimin smiled. You gave it to me. For the first time in months, Jungkook laughed. It was quiet. Almost broken. But real. They stood together beneath the cold night sky, neither of them pretending anymore. There was no grand promise, no guarantee that love would make everything easy. They both knew better than that. But when Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand, Jungkook didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined. Warm, steady, certain. And Jimin finally understood something he should have known years earlier. Sometimes people don't change because they stop loving you. Sometimes they change because loving you for too long without being seen becomes unbearable. Jungkook had changed his clothes, his habits, his confidence, his entire way of standing in the world. But beneath all of it, he had remained the same person who had once sat beside Jimin on a rooftop and quietly promised not to leave. Jimin had simply been too afraid to look closely enough, too afraid to listen, too afraid to love him before time forced him to understand what losing him would feel like. That night, there was no dramatic ending, no perfect answer. Only two people standing beneath the city lights, holding hands after years of almosts and not quites. And when Jungkook leaned his forehead against Jimin's, Jimin closed his eyes. This time, he didn't look away. This time, he stayed. And perhaps that was the only apology that mattered. The first thing Jimin noticed the next morning was that Jungkook had left his hand on the table. Not literally. A photograph. An old photograph of the two of them, taken years ago beneath the same rooftop lights where they had finally admitted what they had spent so long refusing to name. Jimin stared at it over his untouched coffee. For the first time in years, there was no uncertainty between them. And somehow, that frightened him more than uncertainty ever had. Jungkook had stayed the night. Not in Jimin's room. Not beside him. He had simply stayed in the apartment, sleeping on the couch, because neither of them had been ready to return to ordinary life after everything they had said. Now morning sunlight spilled across the floor. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Jimin could hear the shower running. He looked toward the hallway. A strange thought crossed his mind. What if this was temporary? What if last night had only been a beautiful mistake? What if Jungkook woke up and realized that forgiving Jimin was easier than loving him again? The shower stopped. A few minutes later, Jungkook walked into the kitchen. His hair was still damp. He wore a plain white shirt and black trousers. Nothing dramatic. Nothing carefully chosen. Jimin smiled. "You're wearing black again." Jungkook glanced down. "You're analyzing my clothes." "I've been doing that for years." "I know." Jimin lowered his eyes. The words sounded harmless. But both of them understood the weight beneath them. For years, Jimin had watched everything except the thing that mattered most. Jungkook poured himself coffee. "You're starring." "I am." "Why?" "Because I'm still getting used to seeing you." Jungkook stopped. Jimin's heart jumped. He hadn't planned to say it. But perhaps honesty was supposed to feel uncomfortable. Jungkook leaned against the counter. "Is that a good thing?" "Yes." A small smile appeared on Jungkook's lips. "Then keep looking." Jimin laughed softly. "I will." For several minutes, they remained there in comfortable silence. Then Jungkook's phone vibrated. His expression changed. Only slightly. But Jimin noticed. Of course he noticed now. Jungkook picked up the phone. A message. He read it. Then locked the screen. Who was that? Jungkook looked at him. "You're already jealous." "No." "You asked very quickly." "I was curious." "That's what jealous people say." Jimin narrowed his eyes. "I'm not jealous." Jungkook smiled. "You're terrible at lying." Jimin crossed his arms. "Fine, maybe a little." Jungkook's smile faded. "It's not what you think." That sentence made Jimin's stomach tighten. "Then tell me." Jungkook hesitated. The person I changed for wasn't who you thought. Jimin's expression softened. I know. No, you don't. Jungkook placed his phone on the table. There was someone else. Jimin went still. The room suddenly felt colder. Someone else. Jungkook nodded. Before I left, Jimin tried to keep his voice steady. Did you love them? Jungkook looked away. I thought I did. The answer hurt. More than Jimin expected. He stared at the coffee between his hands. And now? Jungkook was silent. Then he said, now I know what I was really searching for. Jimin looked up. What? Jungkook met his eyes. You. Jimin's breath caught. But before either could say anything else, the phone vibrated again. This time, the message preview appeared on the screen. Jimin didn't mean to read it, but he saw the name. Mina. And beneath it, he knows about the letter. Jungkook grabbed the phone immediately. Too late. Jimin had already seen it. What letter? Jungkook's face became pale. Nothing. Don't do that. Jimin, you just told me you were done hiding things. Jungkook turned away. I need to handle something first. What does that mean? It means I can't explain yet. Jimin stood. You promised. I know. Then why are you doing this again? Jungkook closed his eyes. Because this time, the secret wasn't about love. It was about something that had happened years ago. Something neither of them had ever discussed. Something that had quietly shaped every decision Jungkook had made since. Jungkook picked up his coat. I'll come back tonight. Where are you going? I need to see someone. Mina. Jungkook stopped. Yes. Jimin's jaw tightened. Why? Jungkook turned. Because she has something that belongs to you. The words left Jimin speechless. What? Jungkook opened the door. A letter. Then he walked away. The door closed. Jimin stood in the middle of the apartment, staring at the empty space where Jungkook had been. A letter. Something that belonged to him. Something Jungkook had apparently known about for years. His mind began racing. He searched through memories. There had been only one letter. One that Jimin had written when they were younger. A letter he had never sent. A confession. He had written it during a sleepless night after Jungkook had fallen asleep beside him on the living room floor. Jimin had been terrified. He had written everything. Every feeling. Every secret. Every reason he couldn't imagine a future without Jungkook. Then he had hidden the letter inside an old book. The next morning, the book disappeared. Jimin had assumed he had misplaced it. He had never found it. Until now. His knees weakened. No. He sat on the couch. His hands trembled. If Jungkook had found that letter years ago, then everything they had believed about their past might have been wrong. Every misunderstanding. Every silence. Every moment when Jungkook had thought Jimin didn't care. Jimin closed his eyes. The phone rang. Unknown number. He stared at the screen. Then answered. Hello. Silence. Who is this? A woman's voice finally spoke. You shouldn't have let him come back. Jimin froze. Who are you? You know exactly who I am. Mina. A soft laugh. Now you remember. Jimin stood. What did you do with the letter? I didn't do anything. Then why does Jungkook have to meet you? Because he still doesn't know the whole truth. Jimin's heart pounded. What truth? The line went silent. Then Mina whispered. The night you thought Jungkook abandoned you. Jimin's breathing stopped. He was actually trying to protect you. The call ended. Jimin stared at the phone. Rain began tapping against the window. Slowly at first, then harder. The same kind of rain that had fallen on the night, everything between them had changed. Jimin walked toward the window. For years, he had believed Jungkook had chosen to leave. He had believed Jungkook had grown tired of waiting. He had believed his own silence had caused the distance between them. But now another possibility was forming. Maybe Jungkook hadn't walked away. Maybe someone had forced him to. And if that was true, then the years they had lost weren't simply the result of fear. Someone had taken them from each other. Jimin's phone vibrated again. A message from Jungkook. Don't trust anyone who tells you they know what happened that night. Jimin stared at the words. Then another message arrived. Not even me. His blood ran cold. Outside, a black car stopped across the street. The headlights remained on. Someone was sitting inside, watching the apartment. Jimin stepped away from the window. The curtains moved slightly behind him. And somewhere across the city, Jungkook was walking into a meeting with the woman who possessed the letter that could change everything they thought they knew about each other. Neither of them knew that someone had been waiting years for this moment. Someone who had never wanted Jimin and Jungkook to find their way back to each other. And this time, the danger wasn't coming from the past. It was already standing outside the door. The black car remained across the street for 11 minutes. Jimin counted every second. He stood behind the curtain without touching it, watching the rain slide down the glass while the headlights reflected against the wet pavement. The car never moved. Then, at exactly 8:17 p.m., the headlights disappeared. Jimin exhaled. His phone was still in his hand. Jungkook's last message remained on the screen. Not even me. Those 4 words had followed him all afternoon. They had frightened him. But beneath the fear was something else. A growing certainty that Jungkook had spent years carrying a burden alone. And Jimin was beginning to understand why. He grabbed his coat. If Jungkook wouldn't tell him the truth, Jimin would find it himself. The old apartment building stood nearly 40 minutes away. It had once been their entire world. A narrow building with peeling paint, a broken elevator, and a rooftop where they had spent countless nights talking until sunrise. Jimin hadn't returned since Jungkook left. The hallway smelled exactly as he remembered. Dust, old wood, and the faint bitterness of someone's cooking drifting through a neighboring door. He climbed the stairs. On the 3rd floor, he stopped. Their old apartment door was still there. The number had faded. Jimin touched the handle. Locked. Of course. He searched his coat pocket and found an old key. He had kept it without realizing why. The lock turned. The door opened with a long, tired creak. Dust floated through the beam of his phone's light. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. But memories remained everywhere. The corner where Jungkook used to sit while tying his shoes. The window beside which Jimin had once fallen asleep waiting for him. The kitchen counter where they had eaten instant noodles at 2 in the morning. Jimin walked slowly toward the living room. There was an empty bookshelf against the wall. His eyes stopped on the 2nd shelf. That was where the book had been. The book containing his letter. He knelt. Behind the bookshelf was a small crack in the wall. Jimin remembered it. Years ago, Jungkook had accidentally broken part of the plaster while moving furniture. He reached inside. His fingers touched something cold. Metal. He pulled it out. A key. Small. Old. Attached to a faded blue thread. Jimin stared at it. He remembered the thread. It belonged to Jungkook's old jacket. Why would a key be hidden here? He turned it over. A number had been scratched into the metal. 217. Jimin frowned. Then his phone rang. He answered immediately. Jungkook. No response. Jungkook. A breath. Then a voice. Are you at the old apartment? Jimin's heart jumped. Yes. Leave. What? Leave now. Where are you? Jimin, listen to me. His voice was different. Not angry. Terrified. I need you to leave that building. Why? Because that's where it started. Jimin looked around. What started? Silence. Then Jungkook whispered. The reason I changed. Jimin tightened his grip around the key. You told me there was someone else. There was. Mina. Yes. Who is she? Jungkook breathed slowly. She was my sister's best friend. Jimin froze. Your sister. Jungkook had never spoken about her. Not once. Jimin had always assumed he was an only child. You never told me you had a sister. I don't. The words made Jimin's stomach twist. What does that mean? She died before I met you. Silence filled the phone. Jimin leaned against the wall. What happened? I'll tell you everything. Now. Not over the phone. Why? Because someone has been listening to us for years. Jimin's eyes moved toward the hallway. Who? I don't know. A sound came from outside the apartment. A faint metallic click. Jimin stopped breathing. Jungkook. What? I think someone is here. The line went silent. Then Jungkook said, Don't move. The doorknob turned. Slowly. Jimin stepped backward. His heart hammered against his ribs. The door opened. An elderly man stood in the hallway. Jimin recognized him. Mr. Han, the building's former caretaker. He looked at Jimin for several seconds. Then his eyes fell to the key in Jimin's hand. His expression changed. You found it. Jimin stared. Found what? Mr. Han stepped inside. That key was supposed to stay hidden. Who hid it? The old man's gaze shifted toward the empty living room. Jungkook. Jimin's blood ran cold. Why? Mr. Han closed the door behind him. Because he knew someone would eventually come looking. For what? The truth. Jimin's phone remained connected. Jungkook could hear everything. Mr. Han, Jimin said carefully, what happened here? The old man sighed. Years ago, before Jungkook met you, his family was involved in a business dispute. Jimin frowned. That doesn't explain the letter. No. Mr. Han looked at him. The letter was the reason everything became dangerous. Jimin's fingers tightened around the key. How did you know about my letter? Mr. Han didn't answer. Where is it? Again, silence. Then Mr. Han reached into his coat. He pulled out a small envelope. Jimin recognized the handwriting immediately. His handwriting. His knees nearly gave out. No. Mr. Han held the envelope toward him. This was found in the old apartment the night Jungkook disappeared. Jimin stared at it. He didn't take it. Why did you keep it? Because Jungkook asked me to. Why? He told me not to give it to you until he was certain you were safe. Jimin's eyes burned. Safe from whom? Mr. Han looked toward the window. From the person who wanted Jungkook to believe you had betrayed him. Jimin's breath caught. I never betrayed him. I know. Then who told him I did? Mr. Han looked at him sadly. Mina. The name felt like a stone, dropping into Jimin's stomach. But why? Because she believed Jungkook's family destroyed hers. Jimin shook his head. What does my letter have to do with that? Mr. Han looked down. Everything. Jimin finally took the envelope. The paper was yellowed at the edges. His name was written across the front. He opened it. Inside was his own confession from years ago. But something had been added. A second page. Not written by him. Jimin read the first line. If you're reading this, then Jungkook has already told you that he chose to leave. His breathing became uneven. He continued. That's not true. Jimin looked up. Mr. Han was watching him. The letter continued. He didn't leave because he stopped loving you. Jimin's eyes blurred. He left because someone threatened to expose something that could destroy your life. His fingers trembled. The next sentence was worse. And Jungkook agreed to become the villain because he believed you would hate him more safely than you would die loving him. Jimin couldn't breathe. He lowered the letter. What did they threaten? Mr. Han looked away. Your family. Jimin froze. My family. Your father had signed a contract with Jungkook's family years before. When the business collapsed, evidence disappeared. What evidence? Mr. Han's voice dropped. Financial records. Jimin stared at him. I don't understand. You weren't supposed to. Mr. Han pointed toward the key. Room 217. Jimin looked at the number. What is there? An old storage room. Why would Jungkook hide something there? Because nobody ever searched it. Jimin immediately turned toward the door. Mr. Han grabbed his arm. Don't go alone. I have to. No. Jungkook is already meeting Mina. Mr. Han's expression hardened. Then you are already too late. Jimin pulled away. He rushed down the stairs. The rain had stopped. The street was strangely quiet. He looked at the building opposite. The black car was gone. He walked toward the address of room 217. It was in an old commercial building across town. The number on the key matched the second floor. Jimin found the room. The lock opened easily. Inside was darkness. He turned on his phone flashlight. There were boxes everywhere. Old documents, photographs, newspapers, and one wooden chair positioned in the center of the room. On it sat a photograph. Jimin picked it up. It showed Jungkook standing beside a young woman, Mina, and between them stood another person. Jimin stared. His face went pale. He knew that man. He had seen him many times. A trusted person. Someone who had been around them during the years when everything began falling apart. Someone Jimin had never suspected. Behind the photograph was a handwritten note. He was never trying to separate you. Jimin frowned. Then he read the next line. He was trying to make sure neither of you discovered who actually did. Jimin's phone vibrated. A message from Jungkook. I found Mina. Jimin typed quickly. I'm at room 217. The response came almost immediately. Don't touch anything. Jimin stared at the boxes. Too late. He had already opened one. Inside were dozens of photographs. Jimin pulled out the first. Then another. Then another. All of them showed him. Walking to work. Leaving restaurants. Entering apartments. Standing beside Jungkook. Talking to friends. Going home. His stomach turned. Someone had been watching him. For years. He opened another box. Inside were printed messages. Old conversations. Private conversations between him and Jungkook. Some had never been sent. Others had been deleted. Someone had been collecting pieces of their lives. Jimin stepped backward. A sound came from behind him. The door closed. He turned. Mina stood there. She wore a dark coat and held an umbrella dripping onto the floor. Her expression wasn't angry. It was exhausted. You finally found it, she said. Jimin's voice was cold. You watched me. No. Then who did? Mina looked at the boxes. The same person who watched Jungkook. Who? She didn't answer. Jimin stepped closer. You ruined our lives. Mina's eyes filled with tears. I tried to save his. You lied to him. Yes. You told him I betrayed him. Yes. Why? Because I thought it was the only way to keep him alive. Jimin stared at her. You don't get to call that saving. I know. Mina lowered her eyes. I have regretted it every day. Then tell me the truth. She looked up. The man in that photograph. Jimin waited. He was the one who arranged everything. Who is he? Mina whispered his name. Jimin's entire body went still. The person was closer to Jungkook than anyone had realized. Someone who had access to their schedules, their phones, their private conversations, their homes. Someone who had watched Jungkook change his clothes. Someone who had noticed the silver chain. Someone who had known about Jimin's letter before Jungkook ever did. Mina stepped closer. He wanted Jungkook to believe that loving you would destroy you. Jimin swallowed. Why? Because Jungkook had discovered what really happened to his sister. Jimin's eyes widened. What happened? Mina's voice broke. She didn't die in an accident. The room seemed to tilt. She was murdered. Jimin covered his mouth. And Jungkook found evidence. Yes. Where? Mina looked at the boxes. He hid it here. Jimin stared at the room. Then why didn't he tell me? Because the evidence contained your name. Jimin's heart stopped. My name. Mina nodded. But not because you were involved. She reached for another box. Because your father was. Jimin closed his eyes. For years, he had thought Jungkook's distance was a matter of fear. Now he realized it had been something much larger. A secret connecting two families. A death. A stolen letter. A carefully constructed lie. And two people who had loved each other while believing they were protecting one another. Jimin's phone suddenly rang. Jungkook. He answered. Where are you? Room 217. Silence. Then Jungkook whispered. I'm coming. Jungkook. I know. You knew about my father. Yes. How long? A painful pause. Since the night I left. Jimin closed his eyes. You should have told me. I was afraid. Of me. No. Jungkook's voice broke. Of what would happen if you believed me. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. I would have believed you. I know that now. The line went quiet. Then Jimin said, come back. Jungkook breathed shakily. I am. For the first time, the words didn't sound like a promise made out of desperation. They sounded like a decision. Jimin looked at Mina. She stepped aside. He looked down at the photograph once more. The past was no longer a mystery. But it was far from healed. There were still questions. A murdered sister. A hidden room. A father whose name appeared in evidence. A person close enough to manipulate them both. And Jungkook, who had spent years changing everything about himself because he believed loving Jimin openly would put him in danger. Jimin folded the letter carefully. He placed it inside his coat. Then he looked toward the door. This time, he wasn't running away from the truth. He was going to face it. And when Jungkook finally arrived, Jimin knew there would be no more pretending. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Not as two people trapped by the past, but as two people finally brave enough to uncover it. The door to room 217 opened so violently that Mina stepped backward. Jungkook stood there, soaked from the rain, his chest rising and falling as though he had run the entire distance. His eyes immediately found Jimin. For a moment, neither spoke. Jimin saw the fear in Jungkook's face. Not fear for himself. Fear for him. Jungkook crossed the room. Are you hurt? Jimin shook his head. No. Jungkook grabbed his shoulders anyway, checking his face, his arms, his hands. Are you sure? Yes. Only then did Jungkook breathe. Jimin caught his wrist. You knew. Jungkook looked at him. You knew about my father. I knew his name was in the evidence. You knew he was connected to your sister. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I knew enough to be afraid. Afraid of what? That you would look at me differently. Jimin stared at him. You spent years making me think you hated me. I never hated you. You made me believe you chose to leave. I thought you would be safer if you hated me. Jimin's eyes filled. You don't get to decide that for me. I know. Jungkook lowered his head. I know now. Mina moved toward the boxes. There isn't much time. Jungkook looked at her. You shouldn't have called him. I didn't. Jimin frowned. I called you. No. Mina shook her head. Someone else sent the message. Silence. Jungkook's expression changed. Show me. Mina handed him her phone. The message was short. They found room 217. Jungkook's face went pale. Who sent this? I don't know. Jungkook looked around the room. We need to leave. Jimin didn't move. No. Jungkook turned. What? I've spent years being protected from truths I had a right to know. He held Jungkook's gaze. I'm not leaving again. Jungkook stared at him, then slowly nodded. Okay. They began searching. The room contained hundreds of documents, but most were meaningless. Old contracts, receipts, bank statements, photographs. Jimin opened a metal cabinet. Inside were several envelopes. One had Jungkook's name. Another had Jimin's. The third had no name at all. Jungkook took the first. His hands trembled. Jimin noticed. You don't have to open it. I do. He tore it open. Inside was a photograph of Jungkook's sister. On the back was a date. The day she died. Underneath it, someone had written. She knew too much. Jungkook's breathing changed. Jimin stepped closer. What did she know? Jungkook stared at the photograph. She found the financial records. What records? Money that disappeared from both families' companies. Jimin frowned. And my father. He was blamed. Was he guilty? Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin understood. You don't know. No. Then why did you leave me? Because someone gave me a recording. Jungkook pulled out his phone. He played it. Static filled the room. Then a man's voice. If you want Jimin alive, make him believe you betrayed him. Jimin froze. His own name. The recording continued. You have 72 hours. Then another voice. Jungkook's voice. Younger. Terrified. What happens if I refuse? The first voice answered. Then the next accident won't miss. The recording ended. Jimin covered his mouth. Jungkook turned away. I listened to that recording every night for months. Jimin looked at him. You could have told me. I couldn't. Why? Because the person behind it knew everything about you. Jimin stepped closer. Then why didn't they hurt me? Jungkook looked at him. Because I obeyed. The words were barely audible. I broke your heart instead. Jimin's tears fell. You thought that would save me. Yes. It destroyed both of us. I know. Jimin reached for him. Jungkook didn't move. Jimin wrapped his arms around him. For several seconds, Jungkook remained rigid. Then his hands slowly closed around Jimin. He buried his face against Jimin's shoulder. I was so tired, he whispered. I know. I wanted to come back. I know. Every day. Jimin held him tighter. Then why didn't you? Because I thought loving you meant staying away. Jimin closed his eyes. No. He pulled back. Loving someone means trusting them enough to let them choose. Jungkook looked at him. I should have learned that sooner. So should I. For a brief moment, the room felt quiet. Then Mina spoke. There is one more thing. They turned. She held the third envelope. The nameless one. I was told never to open this. Jungkook stared. Who told you? Mina hesitated. The person who threatened you. Jimin's heart began racing again. Then open it. Mina shook her head. You don't understand. Open it. She slowly tore the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Jungkook read it. His expression emptied. What? Jimin took the paper. There were only 3 lines. The person you're looking for isn't outside your family. They've been beside you the entire time. And Jimin already knows them. Jimin's stomach dropped. I don't. Jungkook looked at him. Think. Jimin scanned the room. Someone he knew. Someone close. Someone with access. Someone who had known about the letter. His thoughts raced through years of memories. Friends. Managers. Neighbors. Colleagues. Family. Then one face emerged. Jimin stopped breathing. No. Jungkook noticed. Who? Jimin couldn't answer. Jimin. I can't. Who? Jimin looked at him. The name felt impossible. Because it belonged to someone who had been beside them from the beginning. Someone who had helped them during their hardest years. Someone Jimin trusted more than almost anyone. Then his phone vibrated. A message appeared. You finally figured it out. Jimin's blood turned cold. Another message followed. But you're still looking in the wrong direction. The lights went out. Mina screamed. A heavy sound echoed from the hallway. The door slammed shut. Jungkook immediately pulled Jimin behind him. Stay behind me. A faint metallic click came from the darkness. Then the emergency lights flickered on. The room was empty. But one of the boxes had disappeared. The box containing the photographs of Jimin. Jungkook looked at the open cabinet. He was here. Jimin stared at the doorway. No. What? He didn't come through the door. Jimin pointed toward the wall. There was a narrow ventilation panel. Its screws had been removed. Jungkook understood. He was watching us. Mina whispered. For how long? A sound came from Jimin's phone. A video had arrived. He opened it. The screen showed their apartment. From inside, the camera angle was unmistakable. Someone had been filming them. Then the image changed. Jimin saw himself sleeping. Jungkook sitting alone in the kitchen. Jungkook leaving. Jimin crying. Every private moment. Every vulnerable moment. The final scene showed Jungkook standing on the rooftop the night they reunited. The camera was positioned only a few meters away. Jimin's blood ran cold. They had been watched even then. The video ended. One final message appeared. You wanted the truth. Now come and take it. An address followed. Jungkook stared at the screen. I know this place. Where? He looked at Jimin. My sister's old house. Jimin's heart sank. But it was abandoned. Exactly. Jungkook put the phone away. We're going. Jimin caught his arm. Together. Jungkook looked at him. Together. They left room 217, with Mina following behind. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet. The city smelled of asphalt and cold air. Jimin walked beside Jungkook. Their hands brushed. Then Jungkook reached for his. Their fingers intertwined. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The past had already taken enough from them. They weren't going to let it take anything else. But as their car disappeared into the darkness, someone stood on the roof of the old building behind them. A phone was held to their ear. They found the house. A pause. Then a calm voice answered. Good. The person smiled. Let them come. Because the truth waiting inside that abandoned house wasn't only about Jungkook's sister. It was about Jimin's family. It was about the missing evidence. And most dangerously of all, it was about the reason Jungkook had changed the way he dressed in the first place. The clothes had never been the real secret. They had been a warning, a message hidden in plain sight. And Jimin was finally close enough to understand what Jungkook had been trying to tell him all along. The abandoned house stood at the end of a narrow road where the city seemed to forget how to breathe. Jimin saw it before the car stopped. 3 stories of faded gray concrete, windows dark behind layers of dust, vines crawling over the walls like fingers trying to pull the building back into the earth. Jungkook switched off the engine. Neither of them moved. Rainwater dripped from the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed with a low metallic groan. This is where she lived, Jimin asked. Jungkook nodded. My sister lived here until the week she died. Jimin looked at him. You've never brought me here. I couldn't. Because of the memories. Because of the evidence. Jungkook opened the car door. Cold air rushed inside. Jimin followed. Mina remained in the back seat for a moment before finally stepping out. You're sure this is the place? Jungkook looked at the house. I've spent 10 years trying not to remember it. His voice was calm. Too calm. Jimin noticed the way his right hand curled into a fist. You're scared. Jungkook glanced at him. Yes. It was the first time he had admitted it without pretending otherwise. Jimin stepped closer. Then don't go in alone. Jungkook looked at their hands. Jimin reached for him. This time, Jungkook took his hand immediately. They walked toward the entrance together. The front door opened before Jungkook touched it. Mina stopped. Someone's been here. Jungkook nodded. Dust covered the floor, but there were fresh footprints leading toward the stairs. Jimin's heart began pounding. Do we follow them? We have to. The house smelled of damp wood, old paper, and something faintly bitter. Jungkook moved carefully. Every step seemed to awaken a memory. He stopped beside a wall where children's drawings had once hung. Jimin saw him staring. She used to draw here, Jungkook said. What was she like? Jungkook smiled faintly. She hated silence. Jimin looked at him. That's where you got it from. Jungkook gave him a sideways glance. I don't hate silence. You talk to yourself when you're nervous. I do not. You sing when you're cooking. That doesn't count. And you tap your fingers whenever you're lying. Jungkook looked down. His fingers were tapping against his thigh. Jimin smiled despite everything. You're doing it now. Jungkook stopped. For a moment, they were simply themselves again. 2 people teasing each other in an old house. Then a floorboard creaked upstairs. They both looked up. Jungkook's expression hardened. Stay behind me. No. Jimin. You promised no more secrets. Jungkook sighed. You're impossible. You like that about me. A reluctant smile touched his lips. Yes. They climbed the stairs. At the top was a narrow hallway with 3 doors. The first was empty. The second contained an old desk. The third had a small silver star painted on it. Jungkook stopped. That was hers. He touched the door. His fingers trembled. Jimin waited. Finally, Jungkook opened it. The room was remarkably preserved. A bed, a wooden desk, a shelf filled with books, photographs pinned to the wall. Jungkook walked toward them. There were dozens. His sister smiling. His sister at school. His sister with friends. His sister holding a younger Jungkook's hand. Jimin stood beside him. She looks happy. She was. Jungkook touched one photograph. She believed people were good until they gave her a reason not to. What happened? Jungkook's eyes remained on the photograph. She found something she wasn't supposed to find. Mina entered the room. The financial records. Jungkook nodded. She discovered someone was moving money between the companies. Jimin frowned. Your family and mine. Yes. Who was receiving it? We never found out. Jimin looked around. Maybe she did. Jungkook turned toward the desk. There was an old wooden box on top. He opened it. Inside were notebooks. Dozens of them. Jimin picked up the first. Every page contained dates and numbers. Transactions. Names. Addresses. Bank references. This is it. Jungkook sat beside him. They read together. The deeper they went, the stranger the records became. Money had been transferred from one company to another, then routed through smaller businesses before disappearing. Jimin recognized several names. One belonged to a company his father had worked with. Another belonged to an organization Jungkook's family had trusted. Then he saw a third name. His stomach tightened. That can't be right. Jungkook looked over. What? Jimin pointed. A name. Someone they knew. Someone who had appeared repeatedly throughout their lives. Someone who had always seemed helpful. Jungkook's face went blank. No. Mina moved closer. What? Jimin whispered the name. Mina's expression changed. So it was him. Jungkook stood abruptly. You knew. I suspected. You should have told me. I wasn't certain. Jungkook walked toward the window. His breathing became heavier. Jimin followed. Jungkook. I trusted him. I know. He was there when she died. Jimin froze. What? Jungkook closed his eyes. He was the one who called me that night. The room became silent. He told me she had been in an accident. Jimin stared at him. You saw her? No. Why? Because when I arrived, she was already gone. Jungkook's voice cracked. He told me not to ask questions. Jimin looked at Mina. And you believed him. I was young. Jungkook turned. I was 20. His eyes were wet. I didn't know what grief was supposed to look like. Jimin stepped closer. You don't have to explain. Yes, I do. Jungkook's voice trembled. Because I spent years blaming myself. Jimin shook his head. It wasn't your fault. I should have questioned him. You were grieving. I should have protected her. You couldn't. I should have known. Jimin grabbed his face gently. You were her brother. Jungkook looked at him. You loved her. That should have been enough. It was. Jimin's thumbs brushed away the tears gathering beneath Jungkook's eyes. She knew you loved her. Jungkook finally broke. He lowered his forehead against Jimin's shoulder. For years, he had carried his grief like armor. Now, for the first time, he let someone see the wound beneath it. Jimin held him. Mina quietly stepped out of the room. The rain began again outside. Soft at first, then steady. After several minutes, Jungkook lifted his head. There's something else. Jimin looked at him. My sister left a message. Where? She told me once that if anything happened to her, I should look beneath the blue floorboard. Jimin glanced at the floor. Which one? Jungkook looked around. The room had blue floorboards. Most of them had been replaced over the years. But one remained. Near the desk. Its paint was faded blue. Jungkook knelt. He pried it up. Beneath it was a metal box. His hands froze. Jimin knelt beside him. Open it. Jungkook removed the lid. Inside was a cassette tape, a photograph, a USB drive, and a folded piece of paper. Jungkook opened the paper first. His sister's handwriting filled the page. He read silently. Then he handed it to Jimin. The message was simple. If Jungkook ever brings someone here, it means he finally trusted someone enough to stop protecting them. Jimin looked at Jungkook. His eyes were filled with tears. The note continued. Whoever that person is, tell him I was never afraid of dying. I was afraid Jungkook would spend his entire life believing love means sacrifice. Jungkook covered his mouth. Jimin held his hand. The next sentence made both of them stop. And if that person is Jimin, tell him something for me. Jimin stared at his own name. His breathing stopped. Jungkook looked at him. Keep reading. Jimin continued. You were never the reason he left. You were the reason he survived. Tears rolled down Jimin's face. The final line was written more faintly. Please teach my brother that love isn't supposed to be a punishment. Jungkook closed his eyes. He cried silently. Jimin leaned against him. Neither spoke. Some truths did not need words. After a long silence, Jungkook picked up the cassette. We need to hear this. They found an old player in the desk drawer. Jungkook inserted the tape. Static filled the room. Then a young woman's voice emerged. Jungkook, if you're listening to this, I'm probably not there anymore. Jungkook's breath caught. Her voice was warm, playful, alive. I know you'll blame yourself. Jungkook squeezed Jimin's hand. Don't. A pause. I know you think protecting people means carrying everything alone. The recording continued. But you're wrong. A faint laugh. You were always terrible at asking for help. Jimin smiled through tears. Jungkook whispered. She knew me too well. The recording became quieter. I found out who has been moving the money. Static. Then a name. Jimin recognized it. The same name from the notebook. The same person they had suspected. Then the voice continued. He isn't working alone. Jungkook leaned closer. There are 3 people. The tape crackled. One inside our family. One inside Jimin's family. And one person who has access to everything. The recording stopped. Jungkook stared at the machine. That's it. Mina appeared in the doorway. There may be more. Jimin turned. How? Mina pointed to the USB drive. The recording may have been edited. Jungkook picked it up. We need a computer. There is one downstairs. They moved into the study. The old computer took several minutes to start. When the screen finally lit up, Jungkook connected the USB. One folder appeared. Inside were dozens of files. Financial documents. Photographs. Audio recordings. Then one video. The date was 10 years old. Jungkook clicked it. The image showed a parking garage. His sister stood beside a man. Jungkook leaned closer. Jimin watched his face. Do you know him? Yes. Who? Jungkook's voice was almost inaudible. My uncle. The video continued. His sister handed the man a folder. They argued. Then another person entered the frame. Jimin recognized him. His father. He stopped breathing. Jungkook looked at him. Neither spoke. On the screen, Jimin's father placed something inside the folder. Then he turned toward the camera. The video ended. Jimin stepped backward. No. Jungkook didn't move. My father. Mina whispered. He was there. Jimin shook his head. He couldn't have. Jungkook looked at the frozen screen. I spent 10 years believing your father was involved. Jimin stared at him. And I spent 10 years believing yours was responsible. The realization settled between them. Their families had both been hiding something. But the video didn't show murder. It showed a meeting. A secret exchange. Something had happened between those three people. Something that had been deliberately buried. Jungkook opened another file. A document appeared. At the top was a date. The night his sister died. Below it was a list of phone calls. One number appeared again and again. Jimin recognized it. His face went pale. That number. Jungkook looked at him. You know it. Jimin nodded slowly. It belonged to someone who used to work for my father. Mina's expression hardened. Where is he now? Jimin stared at the screen. Dead. Silence. The room suddenly felt unbearably small. Jungkook leaned back. We're not looking for a person. Jimin looked at him. We're looking for whoever inherited his secrets. Jungkook nodded. And whoever has been watching us. The pieces were beginning to connect. The hidden room. The letter. The surveillance. The financial records. The mysterious threats. Jungkook's sister. Their fathers. Mina. And the person who had manipulated them for years. But something inside Jimin had changed. He was no longer afraid of what the truth might destroy. Because the truth had already destroyed enough. He reached for Jungkook's hand. Jungkook looked at him. We'll find out. You're sure? Yes. Even if it hurts. Jimin nodded. Especially if it hurts. Jungkook squeezed his hand. For the first time, there was no promise that everything would be okay. Only the certainty that neither of them would face the truth alone. They stayed in the study until morning. When sunlight finally entered through the dusty windows, Jungkook looked at the old photograph of his sister. His grief was still there, but it no longer looked like something he had to carry alone. Jimin rested his head against Jungkook's shoulder. Outside, the rain stopped. The house remained silent. But for the first time in 10 years, its silence no longer felt like a grave. It felt like the beginning of an answer. And when they finally walked out together, Jungkook stopped at the front door. He looked back once. I used to think changing myself was the only way to keep you safe. Jimin turned toward him. And now? Jungkook smiled softly. Now I think the bravest thing I can do is let you see me exactly as I am. Jimin stepped closer. I've been waiting a long time to do that. They left the house together. Behind them, the old door slowly closed. Not hiding the past anymore. Simply leaving it where it belonged. The photograph was waiting on Jimin's desk when they returned. Neither of them had left it there. That was the first thing Jimin noticed. The second was the handwriting on the back. You are closer than you think. Jimin stood perfectly still. Jungkook came up behind him. What is it? Jimin turned the photograph over. His face drained of color. It showed the three of them outside the abandoned house. Jungkook. Jimin. Mina. The photograph had been taken only hours earlier. Jungkook took it from Jimin's hand. His jaw tightened. He was there. Mina stared at the image. No. What? She pointed toward the corner. That isn't someone standing across the street. Jimin looked closer. A reflection appeared in the window of their car. A person. Holding a camera. Jungkook immediately moved toward the window. The street outside was empty. Stop. Jimin caught his arm. That's what they want. Jungkook looked at him. You're right. He placed the photograph on the table. We're being watched because they want us to react. Mina nodded. They want you frightened. Jimin stared at the photograph. Then why leave it here? Mina's expression darkened. To prove they can. The room fell silent. Jungkook walked toward the door. I need to check the building. Jimin followed. No. Jungkook turned. You said we would face this together. I meant it. Then stay here. I don't want you going alone. Jungkook's expression softened. I won't. He held out his hand. Jimin took it. They walked through the apartment together. Every room looked normal. Too normal. The kitchen. The living room. The hallway. Then Jimin noticed something. The small mirror near the entrance was tilted. He walked closer. There was a tiny black device behind it. A camera. Jungkook's face hardened. How long has that been there? Jimin removed it carefully. Mina looked at it. Long enough. Jungkook stared at the device. Who installed it? Jimin remembered the message. Someone who has access to everything. His stomach turned. Someone who knew our apartment. Jungkook looked around. Only a few people knew where we lived. Mina whispered. And one of them is still close to you. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Your uncle? No. Then who? Jungkook hesitated. There is someone. Who? Someone I trusted after my sister died. Jimin waited. My uncle's assistant. Jimin frowned. Why would you trust him? He was the person who helped me after the funeral. Where is he now? Jungkook looked at the camera. I don't know. Mina walked toward the table. He may not be missing. Jungkook looked at her. What do you mean? He may have been watching you. Jimin's chest tightened. We need to find him. They spent the next hour searching through old records. Jungkook found an address. A small office in the eastern part of the city. They drove there just before sunset. The building was nearly empty. A receptionist sat behind a glass desk. When Jungkook asked about the man, she looked nervous. He hasn't worked here for years. Do you know where he went? She hesitated. No. Jimin noticed her fingers trembling. You're lying. She looked at him. I don't know anything. Jungkook placed a photograph on the desk. Have you seen him recently? The woman stared at the photograph. Then her face changed. Yes. When? 3 days ago. Jungkook leaned forward. Where? She swallowed. He came here to collect a package. What package? I don't know. What did it look like? A black envelope. Jimin exchanged a glance with Jungkook. Did he say where he was going? The receptionist shook her head. But before they could leave, she whispered. He asked about you. Jungkook stopped. Me. And Jimin. Jimin's heart began pounding. What did he ask? Whether you two were together again. Silence. Jungkook's hand tightened around Jimin's. What did you tell him? That I didn't know. Good. They left. Outside, the sky was darkening. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Why would he care if we're together? Jungkook didn't answer. Jungkook. I think I know. What? My sister wasn't killed because of the money. Jimin stared at him. Then why? Because she discovered what the money was being used for. Mina's face went pale. What? Jungkook looked at her. She wasn't tracking stolen money. She was tracking payments. To whom? Jungkook took out the documents. To people who were being paid to keep certain secrets buried. Jimin's eyes widened. Your sister knew about a network. Yes. And someone killed her to protect it. Jungkook nodded. But there was one person she trusted enough to tell. Jimin looked at him. Who? My uncle. Mina shook her head. No. He was the only one she met the day before she died. But the video showed him meeting her. Yes. Jungkook opened the file again. There is something we missed. He zoomed in on the photograph. His sister's hand was visible. She was holding a small object. A ring. Jimin recognized it. That looks like yours. Jungkook touched his own hand. He wore a simple silver ring. This belonged to my sister. You have it. I thought I did. Jungkook pulled off his ring. The inside was engraved. A tiny sequence of numbers. Jimin stared. 217. Jungkook's eyes widened. The room. Mina stepped closer. What does it mean? Jungkook turned the ring over. There was another inscription. A single letter. Hey. Jimin whispered. Evidence. Jungkook shook his head. No. Then what? He looked toward the window. Her name began with E. Jimin remembered. He had heard Jungkook say it once. Years ago. Elena. His sister. The name he rarely spoke aloud. Jungkook sat down. I thought this ring was just sentimental. Jimin sat beside him. Maybe she wanted you to find something. Jungkook nodded. Maybe she knew she wouldn't get the chance to tell me. Mina looked at the documents. Then we need to go back. To room 217. Yes. Jungkook shook his head. It's already been compromised. Then where? Mina pointed at the ring. Wherever the number came from. Jimin suddenly understood. The building. Jungkook looked at him. The old hotel. They drove there immediately. The hotel had been closed for years. Its sign was broken. The lobby smelled of damp carpet and dust. Room 217 was on the second floor. Jungkook inserted the ring into a small slot beneath the door handle. There was a click. The door opened. Inside was darkness. Jimin switched on his flashlight. A single bed. A table. An old television. Nothing else. Jungkook searched the walls. Mina checked the drawers. Jimin looked beneath the bed. His fingers touched something. He pulled it out. A cassette recorder. There was a note attached. Play this only when you're ready to know why she died. Jungkook stared at it. I am ready. Jimin pressed the button. Static. Then Alina's voice. If you're hearing this, then someone finally found the room. Jungkook closed his eyes. I need you to listen carefully. The recording continued. The money was never stolen. Jimin frowned. It was moved. Jungkook opened his eyes. By whom? Alina continued. It was being used to pay people who were helping families disappear. Jimin's stomach tightened. Families. People who knew too much were given new identities. Mina stepped closer. Why? Because someone was building a private network outside the law. Jungkook's face became pale. And the person running it. Alina's voice cracked. Is someone you trust? The recording stopped. Jimin stared at the machine. No. Jungkook looked at him. What? There was more. The recorder clicked. Another file began. Alina whispered. Jungkook, if you're with Jimin when you hear this. Jimin's heart stopped. Then don't let him leave. Silence. Jimin looked at Jungkook. The recording continued. Because the person behind everything has been trying to separate you two from the beginning. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. He knew. Alina's voice became faint. He knows Jimin's father. Jimin froze. He knows your uncle. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. And he knows me. A long pause. Then Alina said the words that changed everything. His name is. The recording suddenly cut off. The lights in the hotel flickered. Jimin turned. Someone was standing at the end of the hallway. A man. Motionless. Watching them. Jungkook stepped in front of Jimin. The man smiled. Then he turned and disappeared around the corner. Jungkook ran after him. Wait. Jimin followed. Their footsteps thundered through the abandoned hallway. The man disappeared down the stairs. Jungkook reached the lobby. The front door slammed shut. He opened it. Empty street. No car. No footsteps. Nothing. Jimin arrived beside him, breathing hard. He escaped. Jungkook stared into the darkness. No. Jimin looked at him. He wanted us to see him. Mina came running downstairs. The recorder. Jimin turned. What? The second file. They hurried back into room 217. The recorder was still playing. But the voice was no longer Alina's. It was a man's. Calm. Familiar. Jungkook. Jungkook froze. I know you finally found the room. Jimin's blood ran cold. The voice continued. You've spent 10 years believing I wanted you to lose Jimin. A pause. I never wanted you to lose him. Jungkook stared at the recorder. I wanted you to hate him. Jimin felt his stomach drop. Because hate makes people predictable. The voice laughed softly. And now you've discovered why. The recording ended. Jungkook didn't move. Jimin looked at him. Do you recognize the voice? Jungkook's eyes remained fixed on the recorder. Yes. Who? Jungkook slowly turned toward him. His expression was devastated. My uncle. The room went silent. But then the recorder clicked again. A final message played. You have until midnight to decide which family you are willing to destroy. The clock on the wall showed 11:42 p.m. 18 minutes remained. And for the first time, Jimin understood that the truth they had spent years searching for wasn't waiting somewhere in the past. It was moving toward them. Fast, the clock showed 11:42 p.m. Jungkook stared at it as though the numbers themselves had become a threat. 18 minutes. That was all the voice had given them. Jimin stood beside him, still holding the old cassette recorder. Your uncle said we have to choose which family to destroy. Jungkook nodded. I know. But he didn't say what the choice is. Jungkook looked at him. He wants us to find out. Mina suddenly moved toward the door. We don't have time. Jimin turned. Where are you going? To stop him. You know where he is. No. Then where are you going? Mina looked at the clock. Somewhere he expects us to go. Jungkook understood immediately. The old warehouse. Mina nodded. That is where Alina was supposed to meet him. Jimin's heart tightened. How do you know? Because I was there that night. Jungkook turned sharply. What? Mina lowered her eyes. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. You were there. Yes. When Alina died. Mina nodded. I saw your uncle. Jungkook stepped toward her. You knew who killed my sister. I saw him arguing with her. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I saw someone else. Silence. Who? Mina looked at Jimin. Your father. Jimin froze. My father was there. Yes. Did he hurt Alina? No. Mina's voice broke. He tried to stop your uncle. Jungkook stared at her. Then, why did my uncle say your family was responsible? Because he needed someone to blame. Jimin shook his head. This doesn't make sense. It will. Mina took a deep breath. Your father and Alina discovered that the money was being used to protect people involved in an illegal identity network. They wanted to expose it. And my uncle. He was the person controlling the network. Jungkook's face hardened. Then why did he let us live? Mina looked at him. Because killing you would have created questions. She looked at Jimin. But separating you was easier. Jimin remembered the years of silence. The cruel words. The misunderstandings. The letter. Jungkook's sudden disappearance. Everything had been engineered. Not because they were enemies. Because they were dangerous together. Mina continued. Your uncle knew that if you and Jungkook stayed close, you would eventually uncover the truth. Jimin swallowed. So he made Jungkook believe leaving me would protect me. Yes. And he made me believe Jungkook didn't love me. Yes. Jimin closed his eyes. A decade of pain. A decade built on lies. Jungkook touched his shoulder. We know the truth now. Jimin looked at him. But the evidence. Mina nodded. That's why he wants us at the warehouse. Jungkook checked the clock. 11:49. Let's go. They hurried outside. The streets were almost empty. The city seemed strangely peaceful compared to the storm inside Jimin's chest. As they drove, nobody spoke. Jimin looked out the window. He thought about his father. For years, he had remembered him as a complicated man who had died without explaining many things. Now he wondered how many secrets his father had carried. How many things he had sacrificed. How many times he had tried to protect Jimin without telling him why. Jungkook reached across the center console. His hand found Jimin's. Jimin held it tightly. You okay? No. Jungkook gave a small smile. Me neither. Jimin looked at him. I'm sorry. For what? For all those years. Jungkook shook his head. We were both manipulated. But I still chose to believe the worst. So did I. Jimin squeezed his hand. Never again. Jungkook looked at him. Never again. The warehouse appeared at the end of the road. Its windows were dark. A single light burned above the entrance. They stopped. Jungkook stepped out first. Jimin followed. Mina stayed close behind them. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of dust, oil, and rain. Their footsteps echoed. Then a light turned on. A man sat behind a long wooden table. Jungkook stopped. His uncle. Older now. Gray hair. Perfect suit. A calm expression. He looked almost ordinary. That was the most frightening thing about him. You came. Jungkook's fists tightened. You killed Alina. His uncle didn't react. No. Jungkook stepped forward. You lied to me. Yes. You destroyed my life. His uncle looked at Jimin. No, you destroyed your own life by being too sentimental. Jimin stepped forward. Don't talk to him like that. The man smiled. So you're finally brave. I was always brave. No. His uncle shook his head. You were always afraid. Jimin felt anger rise. You used our fear against us. I used what you gave me. You watched us. Yes. You manipulated us. Yes. You made Jungkook believe I betrayed him. Yes. Jungkook's voice shook. Why? His uncle leaned back. Because Alina discovered the network. And you killed her. I didn't. Then who did? The man smiled faintly. She died because she refused to understand that some truths are more dangerous than lies. Jungkook lunged forward. Jimin grabbed his arm. Don't. Jungkook breathed heavily. His uncle remained calm. You see. He looked at Jimin. You are still protecting him from himself. Jimin stared at him. No. He released Jungkook's arm. I'm standing beside him. The man's expression changed. Only slightly. But it was enough. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it. The man looked toward Mina. She has the evidence. Mina stepped forward. No. She held up the USB drive. I have the evidence. His uncle's eyes narrowed. But you don't have the original. Mina froze. Jungkook looked at her. What does he mean? Mina slowly shook her head. I don't know. The man smiled. The original was never in room 217. He pointed toward Jimin. It was with your father. Jimin's heart stopped. My father. Yes. Where? The man laughed softly. That is the question you've been asking for 10 years. Jimin stepped closer. You know where it is? Yes. Tell me. Destroy the evidence against my family. Jungkook stared at him. No. His uncle looked at him. You have 18 years of financial records, recordings, names, and identities. If you release them, hundreds of people will be exposed. People who committed crimes. People who were protected. Same thing. His uncle's voice hardened. You think justice is simple? No. Jungkook shook his head. I think hiding murder isn't justice. The man stared at him. Then he pressed a button. A screen behind him came alive. An old video appeared. Jimin's father. Elena. Jungkook's uncle. And another man. Jimin leaned closer. He recognized him. The assistant. The man who had supposedly died years ago. Jimin whispered. He's alive. The video continued. His father placed a folder on the table. Elena opened it. Inside were photographs. Names. Bank records. Then his father spoke. If we expose this, people will disappear. Elena answered. People are already disappearing. Jimin's uncle looked furious. You don't understand what you've started. Jimin's father replied. No, you don't understand what you've done. The video suddenly ended. Jimin stared at the screen. My father wasn't involved. No, Jungkook's uncle said. He was trying to expose you. Jimin looked at him. Then why did you make everyone believe otherwise? Because it worked. The answer was almost casual. Jimin felt tears gather in his eyes. My father died believing I hated him. The man said nothing. You made me believe he abandoned me. Still nothing. You made Jungkook believe my family destroyed his. The man's expression remained cold. And you made us spend years apart. Yes. Jungkook looked at him. Why? His uncle finally answered. Because your sister was right. Everyone became still. What? She said love made people reckless. He looked at Jimin. She was wrong. His voice became quieter. Love makes people dangerous. Jimin stepped forward. Then you never understood love. The man smiled. Perhaps. Jimin pulled the letter from his coat. His old confession. The pages were worn. I spent years thinking this letter was the reason everything went wrong. He looked at Jungkook. It wasn't. Jungkook stared at him. No. Jimin turned toward the man. This is the reason you failed. The man frowned. Why? Because you thought we would always be afraid. Jimin took Jungkook's hand. But we're not. Jungkook squeezed his fingers. Mina stepped toward the table. You should look at the USB again. The man's expression changed. What? Mina connected the drive to a laptop. A new folder appeared. The man stood. That wasn't there. No. Mina looked at him. It was hidden. The folder opened. Inside was a complete archive. Not just the financial records. Audio. Video. Names. Dates. Payments. And the original evidence. Jimin stared. How? Mina looked at him. Your father gave me a copy before he died. Jimin's eyes widened. He knew you. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I promised him I would only reveal it when Jungkook was ready to stop protecting you. Jungkook looked at her. And you knew when that would be. No. Mina smiled sadly. I was waiting for him to learn that love wasn't weakness. Jungkook looked at Jimin. I think I finally learned. The warehouse doors suddenly opened. Several investigators entered. Jimin's uncle looked around. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. You called them? Mina nodded. The evidence was already sent. His uncle stared at the laptop. You planned this? No. Mina shook her head. Alina planned it. Jungkook closed his eyes. His sister's voice echoed in his memory. Please teach my brother that love isn't supposed to be a punishment. His uncle was taken away. The warehouse slowly emptied. The adrenaline faded. Silence returned. Jimin stood beside Jungkook. Neither knew what to say. Finally, Jungkook whispered. She won. Jimin looked at him. Yes. She really won. Jimin smiled through tears. She brought us back to each other. Jungkook looked at the old photograph of Alina. I wish she could see this. She can. How? Jimin touched his chest. Because everything she wanted for you is happening. Jungkook's eyes filled. He leaned toward Jimin. Their foreheads touched. No dramatic words. No promises about forever. Just warmth. Breathing. Presence. For the first time, Jungkook didn't feel like he had to become someone else. He didn't need the expensive coats, the carefully chosen rings, the perfume, the polished boots. He didn't need to change his appearance to make Jimin notice him. Jimin finally understood. The clothes had never been the message. They had been the symptom. Jungkook had been trying to reinvent himself because he believed the person he had been wasn't enough to make Jimin stay. And Jimin had taken too long to understand that the person standing beside him had never needed to become anyone else. You know, Jimin whispered, I like the old sweater. Jungkook laughed. The ugly black one. Yes. It had holes. I know. It smelled terrible. I know. Jungkook smiled. You still liked it. Jimin looked directly into his eyes. I liked the person wearing it. Jungkook's smile slowly disappeared. Then he pulled Jimin into his arms. Jimin held him tightly. Years of fear seemed to leave them with every breath. Outside, dawn was beginning. The sky changed from black to deep blue, then blue to pale gold. They walked out of the warehouse together. Jungkook stopped beside the car. He looked at his reflection in the window. The charcoal coat, the silver chain, the carefully styled hair. He smiled. Then he removed the chain. Jimin looked at him. Why? I don't need it anymore. He placed it inside his pocket. Jimin smiled. Keep it. Why? Because it's still part of your story. Jungkook looked at the pendant. Then at Jimin. You're right. He put it back around his neck. They got into the car. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Jimin reached for the radio. A song began playing softly. Jungkook looked at him. Where are we going? Jimin smiled. Home. Jungkook's eyes softened. Which one? Jimin looked at him. Wherever we are. The car moved through the waking city. Behind them was a past filled with lies, grief, fear, and missed chances. Ahead was something neither of them could predict. But this time, uncertainty didn't frighten them, because they weren't facing it alone. Weeks later, the investigation uncovered everything. The financial network collapsed. The people responsible for Alina's death were finally identified. Jimin's father's name was cleared, and the truth about Jungkook's sister became public. Jungkook visited her grave one quiet afternoon. Jimin stood beside him. He placed a single white flower on the stone. "I brought someone," Jungkook whispered. Jimin looked at him. Jungkook smiled. "You already know him." The wind moved softly through the trees. Jungkook touched the engraving on the stone. "I finally understand." Jimin waited. "You were right." "About what?" "Love isn't supposed to be a punishment." Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Jungkook took his hand. "And I don't want to spend another day trying to become someone I'm not." Jimin squeezed his fingers. "You don't have to." They remained there until sunset. When they finally walked away, Jungkook looked different. Not because of his clothes. Not because of his hair. Not because of the silver chain around his neck. He looked different because he no longer carried the weight of having to prove that he deserved to be loved. Jimin walked beside him. And this time, he didn't look away. Years earlier, Jungkook had changed the way he dressed for someone. Jimin had noticed too late. But perhaps love had given them one final gift. Sometimes too late wasn't the same as never. Sometimes losing each other was what finally taught them how to stay. And sometimes the person you spend years trying to find isn't waiting somewhere in the future. They've been standing beside you all along. You simply have to be brave enough to look. Months passed after the truth finally came to light. The city moved on. News reports faded. Old names disappeared from headlines. The investigation closed one chapter of a story that had remained buried for years. But for Jimin and Jungkook, healing was not something that happened when the world stopped talking. It happened quietly, in ordinary mornings, in shared meals, in arguments over whose turn it was to wash the dishes, in laughter that returned slowly after years of silence. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, when one of them woke from a bad dream and reached across the darkness, just to make sure the other was still there. Jungkook changed again. But this time, he didn't change for anyone. He started wearing the old black sweaters again. The worn sneakers. The loose jackets. Sometimes he dressed elegantly. Sometimes he looked as though he had gotten out of bed 5 minutes ago and had no intention of apologizing for it. Jimin loved all of it. One evening, they returned to the rooftop where everything had finally begun to make sense. The city below was bright with thousands of lights. The wind was gentle. Jungkook leaned against the railing. "You know what I hate?" Jimin smiled. "What?" "That you were right." "About?" "The sweater." Jimin laughed. "You're still talking about that. You said you liked the ugly one." "It wasn't ugly. It had holes. That made it charming." Jungkook laughed. The sound carried into the night. Jimin watched him quietly. There was something peaceful about Jungkook now. Not perfect. Not untouched by the past. But free. Jimin stepped closer. "I still have your old sweater." Jungkook looked at him. "You kept it?" "Yes." "Why?" Jimin smiled. "Because it reminds me of when I was too stupid to realize how much I loved you." Jungkook's expression softened. "You weren't stupid." "I was." "You were scared." Jimin looked down. "Maybe." Jungkook reached for his hand. "And I was scared too." Their fingers intertwined. The silence between them no longer felt dangerous. It felt like home. Jimin looked toward the city. Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Changing everything. Jungkook thought for a moment. No. Jimin looked at him. Not even the years we lost. Jungkook's eyes became distant. I regret the pain. He squeezed Jimin's hand. But I don't regret becoming the person who finally understood what I wanted. Jimin smiled. And what do you want? Jungkook looked directly at him. You. No hesitation. No fear. No hidden meaning. Just the truth. Jimin leaned his head against Jungkook's shoulder. I wish you had told me sooner. So do I. Maybe things would have been different. They would. Jimin sighed. But we're here now. Jungkook nodded. We're here now. The wind moved through their hair. Below them, the city continued shining. Jimin remembered the first time Jungkook had stood on this rooftop. Young. Restless. Full of dreams. He remembered the promise they had made. Never leave each other. They had broken that promise once. But somehow, after everything, they had found their way back. Jimin reached into his pocket. He pulled out the old silver pendant. Jungkook looked surprised. You still have it. I told you. Jimin smiled. You gave it to me. Jungkook touched the pendant. And now? Jimin placed it in his hand. Now I want you to keep it. Jungkook closed his fingers around it. Why? So you remember. Remember what? That you don't have to change for me. Jungkook's eyes softened. I know. And you don't have to be perfect. I know. And you don't have to hide when you're afraid. Jungkook smiled. I know. Jimin stepped closer. Then what do you have to do? Jungkook thought for a moment. Stay. Jimin smiled. Yes. I'm staying. The words were simple. But they carried everything. The years apart. The secrets. The fear. The grief. The forgiveness. The second chances. Jimin wrapped his arms around him. Jungkook held him close. No cameras. No audience. No performance. Just two people who had finally stopped pretending they didn't need each other. Later that night, they walked home beneath the streetlights. Jungkook wore the same old black sweater Jimin had always loved. Jimin smiled when he saw it. What? Nothing. You're starring. I know. Jungkook laughed. You're never going to stop, are you? No. Good. They continued walking. Their shoulders brushed with every step. The city around them was quiet. For once, neither of them was afraid of tomorrow. There would still be difficult days. Memories that hurt. Questions that might never receive perfect answers. But they had learned something more important than certainty. Love was not about never losing someone. It was about finding the courage to choose them again when you finally understood what they meant. Jungkook had once changed his clothes because he believed someone had to notice him. Jimin had noticed too late. But in the end, perhaps late was not the cruelest ending. The cruelest ending would have been never noticing at all. Jimin finally saw him. Not the clothes. Not the image. Not the person Jungkook had tried to become. Him. And Jungkook finally allowed himself to be seen. As they disappeared beneath the warm glow of the streetlights, Jimin tightened his grip around Jungkook's hand. Jungkook looked down. Their fingers were intertwined. He smiled. Neither said anything. They didn't need to. Some stories end with a goodbye. Some end with a confession. And some end much more quietly, with two people walking home together, knowing that after everything they survived, they had finally found the place where neither of them needed to run. Home was no longer a place. It was a person. And this time they stayed.